Hi, I'm going to do a little bit more on this. And I've done a couple things since off camera since the last video, and one of them is these two were sort of too much blue, too bluish. And I was wanting to bring those back to more of sort of an olive green that could still read as having a lot of yellow in it and still get darker. So what I actually have here is a mix of a couple things, and I started with a little bit of phthalo green blue shade, and then I brought in a little bit of quinacridone burnt orange, and that will give it its sort of grayed out, dulled out, more natural kind of feel. That was a little too dulled out, but more of like some of the darker intense greens you'll see in nature. And then I to lighten that up and bring it back a little bit more towards green, which I want, is to just bring in some more phthalo yellow green. So this starts bringing it more of like an olivey kind of a green. So I'm going to see what happens if I paint these here and here. There's already some paint there. I really hope all that mixing was on camera. That's possibly a tad too dark for this step. What I'm going to do is just bring in a little bit of water and a little bit more of that phthalo yellow green and drop it in right there on the paper. Which can be a lovely effect just in itself. So this is seeming still a little too dark, but I'll mix in a little bit more of that and come back to this one. This one I do want to get eventually really dark, but it's tricky. One of the challenges and the reasons for doing this is to find ways of getting to really dark colors that aren't lifeless. So there's a big jump going on there, so eventually I will likely need to adjust. And speaking of adjusting, I know there's still stuff to do, but I'm having a hard time looking at some of these that I know I want to adjust and not do a little bit of adjusting. This one I want to be a little lighter valued. I think I just got a little overzealous with that mix of yellow and quin burnt orange. So usually what I like to do when I'm lifting, I didn't really do it that time, bad teacher, is to paint the whole shape with clear water before trying to wake up any of the color or agitate it. And now some of that color is more floating around on top. And I'm just gonna use my thirsty brush to lift some of that color out, and I'm doing it in a way where I'm trying to not create streaks in the shape itself, which can be tricky. if it gets too splotchy, there's some things we can do. By we, I mean me. And now as I look at that, it's almost like it's too light. Oh heck, since I'm experimenting and I encourage you to experiment, here's what I'm going to try. I'm going to try waking up a little bit of this, the color on here, which will lighten that up slightly. I'm then going to see about transferring a little bit back to this third one. Those are a little splotchy, but I can hopefully do something about that. And then for this one, if I wanted that to go even darker, I am going to use some of that yellow and the Quin burnt orange. And I might even bring in, to neutralize and darken things down even more, if you can believe it, a little dioxazine purple. Ooh, that was too much dioxazine purple. Sometimes I like using neutral tint. Sometimes I had forgotten that I like to also do a mix with the purple to darken things up and neutralize it a little bit more. I'm going to, once again, in the spirit of experiment, one of the main goals for all this is to try to get a hue or a swatch that where underneath the yellow is still influencing this, the rest of the layers on top of it, so it's still somewhat unified. I will say it's looking splotchy, so I would probably this is the one that's still sort of wet, so what I'm going to do is, and this is what I'll probably do to fix the splotchies. Oh. Maybe that's exactly what I'll do. Of course, this is one of the annoying and most beautiful things about watercolor, so what I'm going to do is just say, okay, that whole shape, I was trying to do a lot of different things, maybe too many things at once, and ended up goofing up somehow. I am kind of liking that, though, I will say. So over here I'm just going to get my paper towel and just soak up the color here, and know that I'm going to have to go after this one in a subsequent layer. I can, if I sort of use the paper towel and go into that shape just a touch, sometimes you can come back and define this shape and just sort of decrease the amount of bleeding it's going to do into the neighboring wet shape. Woo! That was kind of crazy, but good to have documented. It's very common, and don't throw it away and freak out and scream it's ruined. Let's see what else I can ruin. I mean, over here, there's too big of a jump between that, and what I'm thinking might be interesting is to wet this and lift up ever so slight amount. And shift it. So I'm wetting this. I'm picking up a little bit of paint, which is making that shape lighter. And I'm going to shift it over here. Making that one slightly darker. Emphasis on slightly for both of those. It would seem like this one needs to be even a touch darker. I'm not sure if there's any more paint in my brush right now or not. Yeah. So that's a good example of, just how subtle. I think that is reading a lot better sequentially. That could probably, it still could use some help. But how important values are. I mean, that was a very subtle change, and to several of these things, and in my mind, improved things quite a bit. In fact, let me see if I can grab a little bit more from here even and put that in here. It's tricky because you can end up making these just everything too dark. I'm going to try one more thing like that, and then I'm not sure. I'm having fun. This seems like it got, there's a similar thing going on here, and that's kind of a big jump, and these are too close to each other. This has a lot of ultramarine blue on it, I can tell. Ultramarine blue sometimes does a really cool thing of just kind of rising above other colors in the mix. I'm not sure how much blue is in it. That's okay. What is that phrase? Stealing from Peter to pay Paul or something. Maybe that's what I'm doing. No. There's no stealing. Just spreading the love. That might be a little too dark. That might not be dark enough. That is darn dark. So is that. That needs to be darker. As does that. I think what I want to do is this one last one here and then call that plenty for for one video. But I'm going to go with actually that's not what I wanted. It's pretty though. That was phthalo blue. I was wanting to grab phthalo. I'm sorry. What I just grabbed right there was phthalo green blue shade, which is going to make it a nice color. But what I was wanting to do is also bring in some ultramarine blue and phthalo green. So now you guys have no idea what I'm doing. Which is my whole goal for these videos, is to confuse you completely. No, it does get frustrating because it's not an exact science, and there's all sorts of little variables at play that make it necessary to think of different options of getting to something and understanding what these colors are and how they mix and the temperature and the color wheel and all that stuff to help figure that out. I almost want a seriously watery touch more of green there, and actually maybe a touch more of yellow. Let's see what happens here. Yeah, that's subtle, but that's really all I wanted. Very light touch. I think all that green is getting lost in there. It's just something I will often do as well, especially if there's a shape that I'm trying to, that I want to read as black, you know, almost black. I'll try to make one part, some part of the shape to have a little bit of lighter value, just so that green kind of peeks through and tells you this is green, but it's really dark green, and it's really bluish green. Cool and dark. Whereas this is getting more dark and warm. That's plenty. Fun, sure. More later. Hope you enjoyed that. I did.